Hospitals save lives. They don't save marriages. My wife, Emily, was a nurse. Sweet, caring, adored by everyone. Dedicated to her patients, she always said. Yeah, turns out, she was really dedicated. One patient in particular got a lot more than just medical attention. And when I found out, let's just say, some wounds never heal. It started with small things, the kind most people wouldn't even notice. Emily began staying late more often, not unusual for a nurse, but the excuses were flimsy. Emergency at the ICU, a colleague needed help, new protocols to review. And yet, when I checked her work schedule, the times never matched up. Then there were the texts. She always kept her phone close, but one night, as she slept, a message lit up her screen. Can't wait for tomorrow. Same time, winky face, no name, just a number. I could have confronted her right then, shaken her awake, and demanded answers. But I'm not that kind of guy. Anger's easy. Revenge takes patience. Instead of rushing in blind, I decided to get the full picture. So I started watching. Not obsessively, not like some jealous goof. Strategically. I paid attention to when she left, when she came home, how tired she seemed. I made a mental map of her shifts, comparing them to the excuses she gave me. And then, one evening, she slipped up. She had just come back from work, fresh out of the shower, when she tossed her phone onto the bed, screen unlocked. And there it was, a conversation with a number that didn't have a name, but the messages made it painfully clear who it was. Him. You looked so good in that uniform today. Wish I could have stayed longer. Her. Me too. But you need rest, sweetie. Him. I'd rather be up all night with you again. I felt it then, the cold snap of realization, the absolute clarity that comes when you see the truth, raw and undeniable. She was getting cozy with a patient. A patient. Not a coworker, not an ex, but some weak, pathetic guy lying in a hospital bed while I was out working to build our future. And that's when I made my decision. I wasn't going to yell, cry, or beg for an explanation. I was going to set a trap. The next day, I reached out to an old friend, a guy with a knack for playing roles. I need you to act a part, I told him. Think you can handle being a patient for a few weeks? He grinned. What's the catch? I smirked. Just make sure she thinks you're exactly her type. What Emily didn't know was that she was about to meet a new patient, one who was about to change everything. They say you never realize you're in the good times until they're gone. Looking back, I wonder if that was true for me, or if, deep down, I always knew something was off. Our life together was, on the surface, exactly what I'd always wanted. We lived in a quiet suburban neighborhood, the kind with neat lawns and neighbors who smiled just enough to seem friendly but not enough to pry. Our house was modest but cozy, 3 bedrooms, a sunlit kitchen where Emily loved to try new recipes, a living room filled with soft blankets and the smell of fresh coffee. It was a home in every sense of the word. Mornings had a rhythm. I'd wake up early, my alarm buzzing at 5:30 a.m. Emily, curled up on her side of the bed, would mumble something sleepy and bury her face in the pillow. She hated waking up first. I'd get up quietly, shower, make coffee, and by the time I was done, she'd shuffle into the kitchen, still wrapped in a blanket, her hair a mess. Coffee, she'd grumble, and I'd hand her the cup without a word, smirking at how she clutched it like it was her lifeline. Those moments, before the world woke up, were when I felt closest to her. She wasn't Emily the nurse or Emily the wife. She was just Emily, warm, groggy, all mine. Then we'd part ways, me to my job, her to hers. She worked long hours at the hospital, but I never minded. I admired her dedication. She wasn't just punching a clock. She genuinely cared about her patients. I used to think that was one of the things I loved most about her. Now, I realize it was also what kept me blind. Evenings were our time. She'd come home tired but smiling, and I'd have dinner ready, nothing fancy, just something simple. We'd eat together, chatting about our days, laughing at silly stuff we saw online, swapping stories. She'd talk about tough patients, hospital gossip, the little wins that made the stress worth it. I'd share about my work, my coworkers, my own gripes. Looking back, I see the small things I should have caught. How she started glancing at her phone mid-talk, just for a second. How she'd leave it face down on the table, a habit she never had before. How sometimes she'd come home looking almost flustered. Back then, I blamed it on stress. Long hours, tough job. I told myself she was just wiped out. Nights were calm, mostly. We'd curl up on the couch, watch something mindless, and she'd eventually doze off against my shoulder. I'd carry her to bed, tuck her in, kiss her forehead. It was routine, familiar, safe. I was clueless. Weekends were our getaway. We'd take long drives with no plan, stop at random diners, act like tourists in our own town. Sunday mornings meant brunch, her favorite. She'd dress up a little extra, and I'd tease her about it. "It's just eggs and toast, I'd say, and she'd roll her eyes. "It's the vibe," she'd shoot back with a smirk. The little things. The moments that felt so perfect then. And yet, now, I can't shake the feeling that I was living in a bubble she built. That beneath the warmth, the laughter, the shared meals, something was quietly falling apart. There was a night, maybe a month before I found out, that sticks with me. She came home late, later than usual. When she walked in, she looked flushed, out of breath, her hair a little messy. "Sorry," she said, dropping her bag by the door. It was a wild shift. Something about how she said it made me pause. The way she dodged my eyes, the way she bolted to the bathroom, the way she seemed jittery. I didn't push it. Not then. Because I trusted her. Because I was dumb enough to think our life was solid. But now I know the truth. And soon, so will she. It was a tiny thing at first. Something so small most guys wouldn't have noticed. But I did. It was a Tuesday evening. Nothing special. Emily came home late, but that wasn't new. She worked long hours, especially when the hospital was stretched thin. She walked in, kicked off her shoes, and flopped onto the couch with a tired sigh. "Rough day?" I asked, bringing her a glass of water. She nodded, rubbing her temples. "Yeah," she sighed. "Nonstop?" Barely had time to sit. A normal answer. One I expected. But then, as she reached for the glass, I saw it, a faint red mark on her neck, half hidden by her hair. It wasn't much. Could have been anything. A crease from her scrubs, a scratch from her badge. But the second I saw it, something clicked. I didn't say a word. Not yet. I just watched. She took a long sip, then grabbed her phone, unlocking it like always. The screen lit up for a moment before she tilted it away from me, setting it face down on the couch. That was new. Emily never used to hide her phone. She'd scroll through it while we talked, show me funny clips, text friends right in front of me. But lately, she'd started doing little things, keeping the screen turned away, stepping out to reply to messages, putting it on silent when she got home. I let it go. For now. I sat beside her, watching as she scrolled through her messages, her thumb moving a bit too fast, like she was clearing something. When she caught me looking, she locked the screen, stretched her arms, and faked a yawn. "I'm gonna shower," she said. Another change. Emily always showered in the morning before work. But lately, she'd started doing it as soon as she got home. At first, I didn't think much of it. Nurses have long shifts. Hospitals smell like sanitizer and stress. Maybe she just wanted to rinse off the day. That made sense, right? But something in my gut twisted as she walked away, disappearing into the bathroom. The water started running, and I sat there, staring at her phone. A good guy wouldn't have checked, but a smart one would. I grabbed it, pressed the home button. The screen lit up, nothing but the wallpaper. No notifications. No messages. Totally clean. Too clean. Emily's phone was never this quiet. No work texts? No group chats? Not even an email? I turned it off, put it back exactly as it was, and leaned back, staring at the ceiling, trying to ignore the sinking feeling in my stomach. Something wasn't right. The next morning, I started paying closer attention. Emily left for work as usual, in her light blue scrubs, hair in a messy ponytail. She kissed me goodbye, her lips warm but quick. "See you tonight," she said, grabbing her keys. "See you." I waited 3 minutes, then grabbed my keys and followed her. I wasn't proud of it, but I had to know. I kept my distance, trailing her car through morning traffic, watching as she pulled into the hospital parking lot. She parked in her usual spot, grabbed her bag, and went inside. I let out a slow breath. Okay. Normal. Routine. But something still felt off. So I waited. 2 hours passed. I sat in a cafe across the street, sipping coffee, pretending to check emails. Every so often, I glanced at the hospital entrance. People came and went. Doctors, nurses, patients. No Emily. Then, around noon, she stepped out. Not in her scrubs. She'd changed into a casual top and jeans, her hair loose, looking nothing like a nurse in the middle of a hectic shift. She glanced around, pulled out her phone, and sent a text. Seconds later, a guy walked up to her. Not a doctor, not a coworker, a patient. I recognized him from a distance, the way he moved, slow and careful, like someone still healing. He wasn't in hospital clothes, but you could tell. Emily smiled when she saw him. Not just any smile. The kind a woman gives when she's thrilled to see someone. My hands tightened around the coffee cup. They talked for a bit, too far for me to hear. Then, casually, she reached out, fixing his collar, her fingers brushing his skin. He laughed. She laughed. Then she looked around again, checking, making sure no one saw. She thought she was slick. She didn't know I was right there. I forced myself to breathe, to stay cool. This wasn't proof. Not yet. A chat could be nothing. A touch could be harmless. But deep down, I already knew. She was hiding something, and I was going to find out what. I stopped believing in coincidences the moment I saw her with him. From then on, every detail mattered. Every excuse, every shift in routine, every little thing I brushed off, it all clicked into place. I wasn't going to confront her yet. That'd be dumb. I needed the whole story first. Solid proof. So I played along. That night, when she got home, I greeted her like always. Kissed her cheek. Asked about her day. She gave me the usual line, busy, exhausting, barely had time to breathe. It came out so smooth that if I hadn't seen her giggling with that patient earlier, I might have bought it. But now, I was watching closer. She was on edge. Not obvious enough to tip anyone off, but I saw it. The way she gripped her phone tighter, keeping it close. The way she angled herself away when she checked it. The way she faked a yawn, saying she was wiped out, even though I knew she hadn't been running around a hospital all day. After dinner, she showered again, another shift that didn't feel innocent anymore. While the water ran, I did something I never thought I'd do. I grabbed her phone. It was locked. Not a shock. But what was a shock? She'd changed her password. Emily and I never hid stuff from each other. I knew her old code, she knew mine. It wasn't about distrust, just convenience. But now, staring at the wrong password, alert, a cold truth hit me. She was hiding something. I put the phone back exactly where it was and stepped away before she finished. When she came out, towel around her, hair wet, she smiled at me. "Everything okay?" she asked. I smiled back. Of course. She had no clue the game had started. The next few days, I pieced more together. She got clingy with her phone, setting it face down every time she put it down. She kept it on silent. No more text pings, no calls I could hear. But once, just once, she messed up. I was in the kitchen making coffee when I heard a faint buzz from the living room. I glanced over, her phone screen lit up. Just for a second, but long enough to see a preview. Him. "Miss you already." I didn't flinch. Didn't react. Just memorized the number and kept making coffee like nothing happened. That night, I looked up the number. No name. No listing. Just digits with no ties. But I didn't need a name. I knew who it was. I started testing her. Little things, to see how she'd react. One night, I casually said, I was thinking of swinging by the hospital for lunch one day this week. We could eat together. She tensed. It was subtle, a quick pause before she answered, "Oh. I don't know, babe. It's been super hectic lately. Barely get a lunch break." A lie. I nodded, playing along. Makes sense. Maybe another time. She relaxed. Another night, watching TV, I tossed out, "By the way, I ran into someone the other day, one of your patients, I think." Tall guy, dark hair, looked like he'd been recovering. She froze for a split second, then forced a laugh. "Oh, I've got so many patients, hard to keep track." Another lie. The pieces were lining up, showing a picture she didn't want me to see. I followed her again, just to be sure. She had a late shift, or so she said. But instead of the hospital, she took a detour. Different street. Different spot. A place I knew, the apartment complex downtown. She parked, got out, looked around like she was checking for eyes. Then she went inside, and didn't come out for 2 hours. That night, when she got home, she looked me in the eye and said, "Work was brutal today." I smiled. I bet. She thought she was winning. She had no idea I was already ahead. The moment of truth hit faster than I thought. Maybe part of me still hoped I was wrong, that I was overthinking. But deep down, I knew. And that night, I got the proof, the kind that knocks the wind out of you and leaves no doubt. The kind that changes you. It started with her phone. Emily had been careful, guarding it like treasure, keeping it silent, face down, always close. But people get lazy. They get comfy in their lies. And that's when they slip. That night, she was in the shower, and I was in the bedroom, pretending to scroll on my laptop. Her phone, for the first time in weeks, was left alone on the nightstand. And it was unlocked. I don't buy into fate, but that moment felt like the universe handed me the evidence and said, "Here. Look for yourself." I picked it up. No hesitation. Went straight to her messages, to the number I'd memorized. The chat was still open. Him. Can't stop thinking about tonight. Every time I close my eyes, I feel you with me. Her. Stop it. You're making me blush. Him. I mean it. You were amazing. I can still smell you on my sheets. Her. You're so naughty. You know I have to act tired when I get home, right? Him. Does he suspect anything? Her. Not a chance. He's so sweet. So clueless. He still makes me coffee in the mornings like nothing's changed. Him. Wow, that's harsh, but kind of fun. Her. You love it. Him. Not as much as I love you. I stared at the screen, my pulse steady, controlled. I read it once, twice, 3 times. Let every word sink in, etching itself into my brain. Then, as if that wasn't enough, I scrolled up. Photos. Some of her. Some of him. Some of them together. Her in her uniform, smirking at the camera. Him in his hospital bed, grinning. Her sitting close to him, still in scrubs. Time-stamped. Location tagged. My home was a crime scene, and I was standing in it, holding the proof. But I didn't crack. I didn't toss the phone. Didn't yell. Didn't storm the bathroom demanding answers. I did something worse. I smiled. Because now, I had everything I needed. I put the phone back exactly where it was, screen locked. Then I closed my laptop, went to the kitchen, and poured a drink. Whiskey. No ice. Just enough to feel the burn and know I was still in charge. I sat there, sipping slow, listening to the shower run. Picturing her in there, humming, washing off another guy before sliding into bed beside me. My hands clenched, but I forced them to loosen. This wasn't time for anger. This was time for a plan. Emily thought she was untouchable. Smarter than me. That I was some oblivious, loyal sap who'd never see through her. She had no idea who she was messing with. The game had just flipped, and I was about to make my move. Revenge isn't about losing it. It's about control. When I read those messages, I had 2 paths: confront her, shout, throw accusations, demand answers. She'd lie. She'd cry, twist it, make excuses, maybe even flip it on me. She'd try to save herself, talk me into staying, fake some tears to seem sorry. And I wouldn't get the payoff I wanted. That wasn't happening. I needed something sharper, deeper, something that'd leave a mark long after I was done. And I had the perfect plan. Emily's whole life was built on how people saw her. She lived for the praise. Perfect nurse, perfect wife, caring friend. Everyone thought she was selfless, devoted, a saint. That was her act, and she played it well. But now, I had the reins. I could tear that act apart and show everyone who she really was. The question was, where would it hit hardest? Her career. That was her core. She loved being a nurse, not just the job, but the status, the respect, the image. If that went down, she wouldn't just lose work, she'd lose herself. But a basic scandal wouldn't cut it. She'd charm her way into another hospital, spin a sob story about being wronged. No, I needed something permanent. I spent the next week stacking evidence. I didn't just lean on the texts, I needed rock-solid stuff. So I synced her phone to my device through our home Wi-Fi, grabbing every text, call, photo before she could delete them. Every mushy chat with him. Every cringeworthy line where she called me boring, predictable. How she loved sneaking around like some giddy kid. She had no clue I was saving it all. Then I dug deeper. Followed her, quietly timing her shifts against her real schedule. Took pics of her heading into his apartment. Logged how long she stayed. Checked our bank statements. Small cash pulls. Money she spent on their little outings. Dinner tabs, rides, even a hotel charge when his place wasn't free. By week's end, I had a full file on her. Every lie, every move, packed tight in a folder. Then I struck. I started with the hospital. An anonymous tip to HR with screenshots of her chats with the patient. That alone sparked a review. Nurses can't get personal with patients, especially not on duty. Then I spiced it up. Added a few messages hinting she'd slipped him extra meds. Nothing illegal, just enough to make her look sloppy. A risk. Next, I sent a package to the hospital's ethics head. This one had pics, her meeting him outside, heading to his place, sitting close in her scrubs. Even if they didn't axe her right away, her rep was toast. No promotions. No trust. Just whispers and side eyes. Then I turned to him. The patient. He thought he was golden, just a guy getting extra attention. But guys like him always have dirt. A little digging got me his social media, then his job. Middle management, corporate gig, perfect for a scandal. So I made sure his HR got the messages too. Not just his chats with Emily. I found ones where he bragged to buddies about charming lonely nurses, how he could snag more if he wanted. Gross. But gold for me. A polite email to his HR about his attitude toward women at work, with screenshots, did the trick. In a day, he was under review. In a week, jobless. For the final touch, I let Emily's friends and family see the truth. Another anonymous drop, select screenshots, nothing too wild, just enough to make them doubt her. Enough to turn their praise into ice. By the time she caught on, it was over. I sat back, watching it all fall apart. The hospital started its probe. HR called her in. Coworkers whispered. Bosses questioned her. She came home that night pale, rattled, trying to act normal but failing. I saw the fear in her eyes. And I smiled. She had no idea what was next. Revenge isn't just payback, it's timing. You don't rush. You let them stroll into the trap, thinking they're safe, still running the show. Then, when they're comfy, you yank the ground out and watch them drop. That's what I did. Emily didn't see it coming. She was already jumpy, but clueless why. She felt the shift, coworkers pulling back, hush talk stopping when she walked in. She came home wired, distracted, her phone practically glued to her hand. I could see her brain spinning, wondering if I knew. But she didn't ask. She still thought she had the upper hand. She didn't. The real move was set for our anniversary. 5 years married, and she probably expected dinner, maybe flowers, a lukewarm toast to us. She had no clue I was about to torch her world. I planned it down to the detail. Booked a private room at a fancy restaurant, invited close friends, family, even some of her coworkers. Pitched it as a surprise anniversary bash, small, special, a nod to our love. Emily loved playing perfect wife, so she was all in. She took extra time getting ready, curling her hair, picking a dress that screamed effortless class. She kissed me before we left, whispering, "I can't believe you did this for me." I smiled. "Anything for you." We got to the restaurant, and she was beaming. The room was full, her best friend, her sister, her favorite coworkers. Everyone smiled, raised glasses, toasting us. She was in her zone, soaking up the love. Then I stood up. I tapped my glass, calling for quiet. The room hushed, all eyes on me. Emily smiled, expecting a sweet speech, a love note. I smiled back, then pulled a stack of papers from my jacket. I wanted to take a moment, I started, voice steady, to celebrate not just 5 years together, but the trust, loyalty, commitment that make a marriage. I paused, letting it sink in. The vibe shifted, people traded looks. Emily's smile flickered, but she held it. "So tonight, I thought I'd share something special," I went on, unfolding the papers. A peek into our marriage. A little story. I cleared my throat and started reading. Not a speech. Not a toast. Her text messages. Him. "Miss you already." Her. "You're so naughty. You know I have to act tired when I get home, right?" Him. "Does he suspect anything?" Her. "Not a chance. He's so sweet. So clueless. He still makes me coffee in the mornings like nothing's changed." I read them out, voice flat, calm. Every word hit like a brick, peeling back the lie of our perfect life. The room went dead quiet. Someone gasped. Someone muttered under their breath. Emily turned white. I kept going. The messages, the pics, the hotel receipts. Every messy detail of her fling laid bare for the people she cared about most. She tried to cut in. "Stop, please. We can talk about this alone." I raised a hand. "Alone?" I echoed. "Like how you snuck around with your patient alone. How you laughed about fooling me alone." I turned to the guests, holding up the last paper. "And if anyone thinks this is a mix-up, here's the complaint filed against her at the hospital." Turns out, they don't love nurses getting too close to patients. Murmurs spread. Her boss was there. Her coworkers. Her sister. Her parents. Emily looked around, frantic, searching for an out. There wasn't one. And I wasn't done. I pulled an envelope from my pocket, set it in front of her. Divorce papers, I said. Signed. You're not getting a penny. I made sure of that. I leaned in, just for her to hear. Oh, and your boyfriend? Jobless now. Guess you'll need a new playmate. Her face broke. I straightened, raised my glass to the room. To Emily, I said, voice cool and sharp. For 5 unforgettable years. Then I walked out, leaving her in the ruins of the life she thought she had. When I left that restaurant, I felt something I hadn't in weeks, pure clarity. No doubts, no guilt, no looking back. I'd pulled it off perfectly, and now all I had to do was watch the fallout. I didn't need to look back to know what was happening. I could picture it, Emily, stuck in her seat, eyes wide, mouth open, her perfect world crashing down. The gasps, the growing whispers, the shock rippling through the room. Then chaos. She'd grab her phone, hands shaking, trying to fix it. She'd scroll through contacts, desperate for a lifeline. She'd call her best friend first, but that disgusted look would say it all. No one was saving her. Then her sister. Maybe a whispered, "It's not what it looks like," but it wouldn't work. Her sister saw the messages, the pics, the truth. And her parents? The ones who saw her as their golden girl? They wouldn't even meet her eyes. That silence would hit hardest. I took my time walking to my car, soaking it in. By now, she was probably up, chair scraping as she stumbled after me. I could hear it, her heels clicking, her voice breaking as she called my name. I didn't stop. I got to my car, unlocked it, and right on cue, I heard her shaky, frantic, wrecked. "Wait, please." I turned. Slow. She stood there, makeup smeared, breath uneven, panic pouring off her. Gone was the flirty, confident woman from the texts. Gone was the wife who thought she was untouchable. This was someone who just realized she'd lost it all. I said nothing. Just looked. She took a trembling breath, tears welling up. "I can explain." I raised an eyebrow. "Explain what?" My voice was calm, almost amused. "How you spent months sneaking around. How you laughed about tricking me. Or how you tossed everything for a guy who's got nothing left." Her mouth opened, but nothing came out. She had zero. She tried again, voice cracking. I messed up." I let out a short laugh. "Messed up?" I tilted my head. Messing up is forgetting an anniversary. Messing up is texting the wrong person by accident. My eyes locked on hers, cold. "What you did? That was a choice. Every single time. You picked this." Her face fell apart. "I didn't mean to hurt you," she whispered. I snorted, shaking my head. "You didn't mean to get caught, Emily. That's all you're sorry about." She stepped forward, reaching for me, but I stepped back. That one move crushed whatever she had left. Her breathing hitched. She glanced around, seeing the eyes still on her from inside. No one was coming. No one was on her side. She was alone. And then, the break. She covered her face, shoulders shaking. A sob slipped out. Then another. Not guilt tears losing tears. I watched for a second, letting her sink in the quiet. Then, barely above a whisper, I said the words that finished her. "You're nothing to me now." Her hands dropped. Total ruin. Then I got in my car. No big speech. No dramatic exit. Just the door shutting, the engine starting, and me driving off from the mess she made. I didn't look back. Because I'd already won. The aftermath's always the quietest part. The storm was over, the fire had burned it all down, and now Emily was left with the rubble. I'd moved on. She was stuck in the disaster she built. Word got around fast. By the time I got home, my phone was lighting up. Friends, family, people from the dinner, people who heard later. Everyone had an opinion. Most? Good for you. She had it coming. Never liked her anyway. Emily's phone was probably blowing up too, but for different reasons. The people she thought had her back, her friends, co-workers, family, they all saw her true colors. Betrayal's wild like that. It doesn't just break one thing, it poisons everything. Her best friend, the one who'd gushed about how lucky Emily was to have me? Out. She'd seen the texts, heard Emily's own words. No excuses could fix that. Emily wasn't the good guy, she was the bad one. And no one wanted that stink on them. Her sister? Livid. She told me later Emily called her crying, begging for understanding, calling it a dumb slip-up. Her sister wasn't having it. "How could you do that to someone who loved you like that?" she asked. Emily had nothing. Her parents? That cut deep. They'd adored me. always told her how lucky she was to have someone solid. No? Just shame. I could see it. Emily sobbing into the phone, trying to sell them some line about me not being perfect. Them, quiet, let down, done with her. But the real hit? Her career. The hospital didn't boot her right away, but the damage was set. Ethics folks started digging. Her rep, years of hard work, was trash now. Patients gossiped, nurses dodged her, doctors gave her cold looks. She wasn't just a nurse anymore. She was that nurse. And that doesn't fade. HR hauled her in, gave her an out, quit quietly, or wait for the axe when the review wrapped up. She picked the quiet route, thinking she could bounce back elsewhere. But word travels. No decent hospital would touch her. And I made sure of it. I'd sent the proof, the texts, receipts, the works, to every big hospital around. No one wants that drama on staff. By the time she tried applying, the doors were shut. Her guy, the patient she tanked everything for, he wasn't much better off. Fired. Humiliated. And word is, he'd already moved on to someone new. He'd played her as much as she'd played me. Fitting. Me? I was good. Moved out in a week. The house, mine, thanks to a prenup she never bothered reading, went up for sale, profits all mine. I packed slow, leaving just enough of me behind for her to feel the void when she walked in. She called. A lot. Left voicemails I ignored. Sent texts I didn't read. First, it was begging. Let's talk. Let's fix it. Give me a chance. Then apologies, pity parties. I don't know what's wrong with me. Then anger. I can't believe you'd do this to me. You ruined my life. Did you have to embarrass me like that? I never replied, because none of it mattered anymore. She chose this. Now she was living it. Last I heard, she's a receptionist at some tiny clinic, the only place that'd take her. No title, no pride, just a woman answering phones, a shell of who she was. And me? I didn't just move on, I leveled up. New city, new gig, new life, one where her name doesn't exist. That was the real win. Not just taking it all from her, but showing I never needed her anyway. Justice isn't always what you think. It's not yelling, not fighting, not even watching them squirm. Real justice is quiet. It's letting them sink in their own mess while you walk away, unscathed, better than ever. That's what I did. I didn't beg. I didn't crumble. I didn't glance back. I wiped her from my life like a smudge on a window, quick, clean, gone. And that's what broke her most. No big final showdown. No last talk where she could spin lies or plead for a redo. No shot for her to play victim. I took that from her. Left her in the quiet, in the fallout, with nothing but her regrets in the mess she made. And me? I stepped into a life where she's a ghost. But I wonder, what did she think would happen? That I'd cry? Hold her, say it's fine, we'd figure it out? Did she think I'd be one of those guys who blame themselves, who take back someone who stomped on their trust? She must have, because the panic in her voice when she called, texted, tried every desperate trick, it screamed someone who thought she still had a hold on me. She never did. Not really. That's the kicker, isn't it? People like her don't regret the betrayal. They regret losing. Losing the safety, the comfort, the guy who'd have stood by them through anything. But when they see you are the best they'd ever get, it's too late. I think about it sometimes, where she's at, if she still spins tales to feel better, if she looks in the mirror and sees what she can't dodge. Because the truth is, she threw it all away for nothing. A fling, a daydream, a quick thrill that fell apart the second I pulled the strings. Now she's just another woman who lost everything because she thought she could outsmart the guy who loved her. But I don't hate her anymore. No anger, no hurt, just the quiet satisfaction that she'll carry this forever. She'll never forget standing in that restaurant, exposed, powerless, as her life crashed down. She'll never forget the silence after I left, the cold truth that this time there was no fix. And she'll never forget she had a guy who'd have given her the world, and she lost him for good. So tell me, what would you have done in my shoes? Would you have walked away, or made sure she felt every bit of the sting she dealt? Let me know, because I know what I did. And I've got no regrets.